You guys just saw the above definition from Wikipedia.com on what a computer role-playing game is. Ben, what's your definition of it?
Well, I mean, it all stems back from paper and pencil. This is where role-playing games come from. I mean, they've been around since, as long as...
Since the Dark Ages.
Yeah, since the Dark Ages of gaming. So, my definition of a role-playing game would be that it's a game where you take on a specific role, and you also build attributes up and level up as you go, and it builds and builds. I mean, that's how I look at a role-playing game. You play a role, and you build upon that character.
Mm-hmm. Okay. To me,
how do you feel about
how do I feel about
game?
It? Role-playing in a video game is almost an oxymoron. Every single video game is a role-playing game. Every single one of them. You're playing Pong. You're playing the role of a person playing tennis. You're Final Fantasy. You're playing Cloud Strife. You're no longer, Curtis Mays. You're not playing that role
but
anymore.
you could do that with anything. That's not like, we're talking
if talking about compared to Dungeons and Dragons, where I come up with paper mache guy and I'm an elf. You're taking the role of something else that's not you, and that applies. Video games, all video games apply that same thing. Now, getting more specific, I agree. It needs to have levels, weapons, a story helps. Doesn't necessarily have to have great graphics or great music or anything like that, but it needs to have stat building. And it needs to be able to take it in various directions.
I feel like a role-playing game, if nothing else, should make you feel that you're becoming part of that character, and you try to play off the role of that character.
Like playing the role of Mario when he's stomping a fucking turtle.
No.
Yes.
Like playing...
You are Mario.
It's more than that, though, because when you're playing Mario Brothers, you don't really take on... He already has his set character, and he doesn't get any better than that.
But he does, because
you get the mushrooms and you get the powers, but it's just, you don't... grow stronger over time.
Yeah, you don't turn into level 90 Mario, unless you're talking about Super Mario RPG, but that's
an RPG. Yeah. That's why it's called an RPG. There's just certain games that are action games. There's certain games that are role-playing games. And the role-playing games they're usually much more involved.
Unless you're like me and you go to, you do something ridiculous, like try to go like the original Dragon Warrior, go to then Dragon Castle level 13, get your ass handed to you, because you use that run button a whole lot. Most role-playing games they should have a gradual upswing in difficulty, but almost every video game has that. So, to me, there is that certain genre in there, but to me, it's all...
I see your point as if you looked at every game, there's role-playing aspects to every game. But when you talk about a role-playing game, you talk about games like Dragon Warrior, you talk about games like Final Fantasy. These are really... games you think about.
Yeah, within the wide, there is a specific genre, and I think within that genre, it's very interesting, because we've gone from something to me that is everything that's RPGs, gone down to a genre that's used to be very select, and now we're back expanding upon it again. We'll talk about more of that later on in the episode. But we went out in the street and asked some of you guys what you thought what an RPG was to you. And here's what you guys had to say.
We're here at the mall today to find out what people think about role-playing games. What's your definition of a role-playing game?
Like Knights of the Old Republic was a good role-playing game. I can't stand where you have to sit there and they just line the characters up on the screen. Knights of the Old Republic seemed a little bit more static, but in
My definition of a role-playing game is one in which you use your imagination.
Say Final Fantasy, you just have the characters lined up and then it goes from character to character to...
Any game where basically the focus is more on the storyline, the development of the characters.
The character and everybody gets...
But do you not do that really in Knights of the Old Republic?
You do, but it seems to be a bit more... you can run up on them and get close if you want to use this.
Great storyline. It has to have awesome storyline.
Sword, or you can stay back if you want to throw a grenade. But with, most role-playing games are just magic and, I use jelly legs and make you fall down. Break.
Anything goes, what you want to choose is basically how people think in reality.
So let's take a look at where we've come from in RPGs.
Doing our history lesson. Yes. All right, let's start us off, Mr. Dungeons and Dragon Boy.
Dungeons and Dragons, you had paper and pencil. And you came up with all this...
In
a dream.
Magical unicorns.
Yes. So you started off, you'd use dice, you used your imagination, and you built upon, your characters built up, and you
Crafts
got
for white folks. Save
Yeah.
and throw.
So then after that happens, the video game designers start coming in, and they're like, I want to we could make this, but we could try to make it where you play, and we already have our Dungeon Master, which is the computer, and they come out with games like Ultima.
Ultima, which was interesting because you could fight any body in that game. You could start off level 1 and say, hey, I want to go fight the king. You will die viciously. But you could do it.
And which was great about the first role-playing games is that you actually got to kind of do what you want. I mean, even in a game, if you want to consider like Legend of Zelda a role-playing game, it doesn't build attributes. So
but it builds item strength.
Yeah, and also they had the first, Legend of Zelda, it was like you had the items. You got to pick new items to use, and you needed to get those items to get different
items. Yeah. The whole idea of commerce in a video game.
But then you have games like Final Fantasy and Dragon Warrior.
Yeah, Dragon Warrior. That series from the beginning has always been a grinder's dream. That's all you do. It's non-linear, which gives it a certain amount of advantage over games like Final Fantasy, which tend to be very linear in their story approach. But at the same time, you're doing a lot of grinding, doing a lot of finding. You're finding objects.
Final Fantasy, as it went on, just looking at Final Fantasy in itself, 7, it was much more linear than like even the original ones, and it's just kind of as they've gone on now. 10, it's pretty much you do what they tell you. You don't really get to pick.
A book in video game format. But on the other hand,
I just feel like those kind of games, they step away from really role-playing aspects as much as you're just kind of watching the story.
But on the other hand, though, we have the games that have taken off a little bit more like Dragon Warrior. You have your Star Oceans, Lufia's. I'm talking old school on a couple of these. Where you can say you still have the linear world, and there's still so many things you can do ability-wise. The hardware just hasn't got there yet, at that time anyway. But you can sit there for an hour making pudding.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see this.
In Star Ocean, you could cook.
You could cook, clean, alchemy.
You got a lot of different choices, and you had in the beginning of it, you had two different people, and there was how many different endings to that game?
I believe they had two. It was Star Ocean 2, PS1. 2 main characters had 81 endings.
That's insane for that time, especially.
Yes. The graphics took a hit because of it. Dragon Warrior 7, for the PS1 as well, graphics took a huge hit. They look crappier in some of the 16-bit games that come out. But you had hundreds of hours of gameplay, multiple things to do, and no one really tells you what to do. You just kind of either stumble upon it, you find a facts sheet online, or you had a strategy guide. And even with those things, it's very long, very involved. You're either grinding and leveling and exploring, or you just don't play those type of games. You go more for the Final Fantasy stories being told to you.
And then after all those, you get the Final Fantasy 7. You get the graphics out the ass. That's whenever graphics.
Final Fantasy 7 is a watershed moment in the RPG field. And I said this in the previous episode in video gaming in general, but especially in this field, because now you're looking at before RPGs. You've got a couple different kinds. Most of the old school, especially from Japan RPGs, had the Down syndrome kids that they had the big fucking head, the little bodies. 4 of them came together sometimes, but then those 3 guys could go into fourth person.
This was the first time you actually saw.
Come out of his pocket when the story moment happened.
You saw them trying to make it more realistic.
All right, so we get into these games. We got it's basically sector off in 2 veins. You got your graphics whoring, story-driven games.
Yeah, that's after. It's pre and post Final Fantasy 7 is really what you want to look at.
Final Fantasy 7 ruled the market, and then RPGs had to change themselves, the grand majority of them, to fit that. Mm-hmm. Wild Arms. You have Grandia. You have the different ones like Sudoku. You have Dragon Warrior, Dragon Quest, which is still stayed relatively up until now, where we're getting everything's graphics related and story driven. And like today, now we have games like Xenosaga, which is an anime that just happens to have a couple of hours of role playing in it. Final Fantasy X2, which for the life of me, but then
you have games like Morrowind, which really take you back to kind of the roots of role playing. It's like anything you do is going to affect your character. As you fight monsters, the more you hit it with your sword, the better you become with swords. The more you defend with your shield, the better you are at shields. I feel like Morrowind was really truly like a great role playing game. As a role playing in the role playing game series, Morrowind really it's shown how it should be done, because you really want to become one with your character.
So basically now, it's 2005, we came to the point where we've got basically two types of role-playing games. Ones that are graphic heavy, linear story, minimum input from the player, or you have your very open exploration, maybe a slight cut in graphics.
But really, there's not just two. I mean, there's also the third, which is the Morpeg way, which is the massively multiplayer online role-playing game, or MMORPG. It's the easiest way to say it. It's very hard to spit out. But, I mean, there's three types. You have the graphic horror, you have the long, redundant game, and then you have these new ones, which are the online games, and millions of people, or hundreds of thousands, how many people playing together on one gigantic server, which could be, I mean, I really see this as the future, but let's go see what other people think is going to be the future.
Where do you see role-playing going?
Up your ass, motherfucker.
Actually, see it probably going more with aliens.
It's a matter of time before Xbox and PlayStation get into that genre of games. I mean, like, what's the big one right now?
Really, right now, it looks like all the new ones are going to go on to the MMO, the online massive multiplayer area.
World of Warcraft is a great game.
Yeah.
But the thing is that you have to have an online, you have to have a high-speed internet connection, and you know it's very expensive to do.
Yeah.
If they don't get a new original storyline or basis, they're just going to start repeating each other and not really being anything, I think.
Whenever that price on that stuff drops, I see companies like Microsoft and Sony beginning to get into that themselves.
Let's just say console version is going down poorly. Like take these games that are coming out new, like PS3 or Xbox or anything, any type that's going to be coming up. Like, think, what about all those other older games? What are they gonna be? They were like just sitting there, just collecting dust is what I think. And then people will be like, "What's Final Fantasy first? What's that?"
All right, well, those are some interesting responses we got from the people today, I think.
Yeah, it's good to see other people's opinions on role-playing games.
Yeah, some of them were silly, but some, some of them I agree with.
As always are with people who play role-playing games.
You're such a pretty little boy now.
Fuck you.
Fuck you. Ben, where do you feel like we're going to see this genre go the next couple of years?
I mean, I really feel like the future in role-playing games is really the online. Because, I mean, even games, I say Morrowind was great, but without playing with people, you really didn't get the full role-playing experience. Because, I mean, in the earliest role-playing games, it was the greatest part about it was you're with your friends, and you're all working towards one. You're high and drunk, and you're all working towards one goal. And that's what you're getting with Morpegs. I mean, you're not sitting next to your friend, which you can be if you choose to.
Yeah, if you want to go.
But I mean, there's been many great Morpegs that have come out so far. I mean, as Ultima Online, and then Evercrack, and you know, Star Wars Galaxies. If you
for a month or two,
it's evil as hell.
Yeah.
But then now with Warcraft, World of Warcraft, I mean, this game is really one of the greatest role-playing games I've played. I mean, it has the online. It has, you know, it's not real linear. You can kind of choose where you want to go, and I just feel like the market's really headed just for online play. I mean, why play role-playing games by yourself when you can play them with friends, unless you have no friends. But then even on those games, you can pick up other friends along the way.
However, there's going to be some things they're going to have to fix about those. I think it's too redundant. It's an expansive world, but not very expansive gameplay. It's very click, 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 do buttons, get 6, orc head, and hand it to this person, get XP.
But really, I mean, that is how role-playing games have been for the whole time.
Yeah, but what's been the saving grace of those, though, is that most of them have had good stories, and no one pays attention to the story.
I pay attention to the story of Warcraft. I paid attention because
through 1 through 3. But
1 through 3. I mean, then after 3, WoW itself, I get the story from 3 after beating that, and then this is 30 years later, or I'm not exactly sure how many years later, but it's after that happens. And now the countries are at war, and they have the Alliance and the Horde. I mean, there's a lot of story to be had, and if you enjoy the story part, you really can go and look at and read. You can read all the quests, and you can find out what these characters are doing. And I mean, and there is, in game, like levels. You get to level 60, and there's quests that really further the story, which they can build upon.
Yeah, I think they're gonna have to build upon that. Another example where RPG could go, I think, you look at games like Indigo Prophecy, where to myself, this is the first game that really says, okay, interactive movie. It's role-playing, to be sure, and the gameplay is. I'm not a big fan of how it's worked, but I think it's a great idea. It's a very ambitious idea that I would like to see taken to that next level.
I just really feel like, I mean, this is really just Dragon's Lair with souped up graphics.
Well,
I don't
yes,
really,
it
I
is.
mean, it has, I guess, some role-playing aspects. You take on the character, but you get 3 characters at first,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, it just seemed kind of boring to me for as much as I played it. Granted, I've not played it for more than a few hours, so I can't really give you a full review of the game. But I just feel like it doesn't have the same, maybe the action that I want out of a role-playing game.
Obviously, a turn-based engine is not going to work on something like that, but it's something better than Simon Says. That's all I'm saying about it. Is, I can play Simon Says, or I can play Simon Says, or I can watch a movie. I don't want to watch a movie.
And it
play
does
Simon
have,
Says
I
at
mean,
the same
anything
time.
you do in that game, it changes what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I think that's the definition of role. I mean, taking it back to Dungeons and Dragons, what you do affects the next move. And once again, taking that Dungeon Master as the computer aspect and saying, okay, now whatever happens, well, now you're fucked.
So
Well,
really
now
going
you're-
back to your point, so you think role-playing games you have to take one action and it affects the next? Well, if you kill a fucking mushroom or you kill a Goomba in Mario, then it does not affect your next action unless he hits you
Well, it
first.
affects your next action because you don't. I mean, you just jump up from there, or if you jump on a turtle. But yes, I painted is Super Mario Brothers 3 or Super Mario Bros. Anywhere close to Indigo Prophecies? No. Dragon Quest 8. I don't like the new look they're putting on it. We'll see. Final Fantasy 12 has had many issues getting out in development and into release, and I think these type of games are going to suffer in the future. I think people are going to want a more interactive experience, either through online gaplay or through with the game itself.
And really,
rather than
I feel
story
like that's what's going to be the problem. Oblivion looks beautiful, and I think it'll be a lot of fun, but I don't think it's not going to be WoW to me. And I mean, WoW, it's just because I get to interact with other people. I mean, that's a big part of role-playing for me, is being able to interact.
The perfect role-playing game then would be a Morpeg with a multifaceted interactive system that gives us a multitude of different quests and ideas to do with people online.
Well, the perfect Morpeg is really live-action role-playing, if you want to get down to it.
Yeah, because
you
you
get
can
to
just
actually
smoke out with your
become your
friends, get
character.
drunk and make up shit.
And I want to start a live-action role-playing Grand Theft Auto, so we can all become gangsters and start shooting people.
Yes.
I want to see more
I want
live-action
to see you
role-playing
try
games.
to defend yourself in the court with that one. Yeah, we were playing.
We're
Dungeons
playing a
and Dragons,
game.
we took Grand Theft Auto.
I mean, you don't
Hey.
have to kill people, but you
The
can have
hooker
paintball
had
guns.
to die. It was part of the game. I'm sorry. The DM made me. I lost my saving throw.
Well, that's part of the game.
That is
Being in
part of the
jail for the
game,
rest of the
yes.
life.
Yes, you lost. You chose your own adventure and you lost.
All right, thanks for watching the show. Hope you learned a lot. Hope you have a lot to say. If you have a lot to say, look at the forums. Also, we need donations. Please.
And buy some t-shirts.
Or you can go to our website and buy t-shirts at the Ransom TV store. T-shirts.
T-shirts.
Make a person happy.
Yes.
Thanks for watching.
Zing.
Zing.
Zing.